George Washington's Christmas message for Americans complying with, quote unquote, the Great Reset. Contemplating infinity causes one to recognize both the miracles of life as well as the absurdity of life. If you imagine an outward expansion through an ever-expanding cosmos, as well as an inward expansion to an ever-expanding subatomic world, it increases the awe. Of course, if we're dealing with infinity, we have to recognize the possibility that it's not expanding and has always existed. Still, there is then the issue of whether the idea of expansiveness is simply consciousness, whatever that is, creating an illusion of expansion by focalization, potentially becoming reality. The limitations of perception clearly come to play when discussing these topics, let alone the limitations of linguistics or mathematics and their inability to encapsulate higher levels of truth. And the above exercise can bring on the sense of awe. How about the absurdity of it all? Keeping in mind the above, imagine sitting at a desk, peering into a high-powered microscope and discovering a universe. Then as you adjust your lens, you see this tiny planet. As you adjust further, you see this tiny little world with this thing we call civilization, the apparent infinite number of subatomic particles, and infinite solar systems, galaxies, and so on that exist to support this thing called life is both a miracle and absurd at the same time. Yes, I know the cosmos and the subatomic world can be considered alive too, but let's not digress. As you adjust your microscope further, you see a battle initiating on Christmas night, 1776. Why not? Why should you be bound by time in this thought exercise? General George Washington was leading his troops undetected across the Delaware River, launching a bold surprise attack on British-occupied Trenton. This bold attack, initiated on Christmas night, was a deliberate attempt to catch the Hessians, the German mercenaries, off guard after a day of Christmas drinking and celebrating. This bold attack on Christmas night was born out of necessity. British troops occupying America had reached 43,000 soldiers. To make matters worse, a once 25,000 soldier strong Continental Army had dwindled to 4,300. Can you imagine? As if this was not bad enough, on December 31st, most of the Continental Army's enlistment terms would end. This would, of course, mean the end of the American Revolution and likely the end of a rope for Washington and the patriots that were signatories to the July 4th Declaration of Independence. Arguably the most underrated general in history, General Washington was an American Caesar and as such would not allow for failure. Delayed by weather, Washington led 2,300 men across the Delaware River, and what was supposed to be a pre-dawn invasion occurred at 8 a.m. Some American soldiers had no shoes and left a bloody trail as they marched through the snow on their way to battle. An hour later, 900 of the 1,500 unsuspecting and mostly hungover Hessians were killed or captured on the morning of December 26th. This was the first victory for the Americans and the turning point of the war. The Continental Army remained intact and eventually swelled again. James Madison, John Marshall, Aaron Burr, Alexander Hamilton, James Monroe, who was severely injured, all participated in the battle. Some of the Hessian prisoners were later paraded through the streets as evidence of the Continental Army's victory. George Washington was an indispensable man. General Washington did not win every battle, and often his battle plans were too complex. He was no Napoleon. Napoleon was also no Washington. Our view of Washington is largely influenced by and skewed by the aged portrait rescued by Dolly Madison. General Washington was a commanding figure at 6'4" at a time when such a height was very uncommon. Washington formed a Continental Army when a continental government did not exist. He held his army together and eventually won the war. An American Caesar, Washington did what no other man has ever done. he denied the crown and retired from public life after 2 terms as president. We could attribute this to his old age at the time and no heir. Still, like winning the war, he did it. This too was a miracle. In the current unrestricted war by globalists seeking to dismantle human civilization, there may be no indispensable man at this time, or at least none has arisen. And I'd have to imagine if Washington were alive today, he'd have organized a sort of continental army by now, and we'd know who he is. Soldiers marched barefoot and bloody at the tail end of the mini ice age into the Battle of Trenton. We aren't seeing that type of courage yet, although there have been some heroic medical doctors that have resisted at great expense. These twisted transhumanists are trying to tamper with the miracle of life and turn the planet Earth into the island of Dr. Moreau, yet we are still in the stage where our politicians are pretending it is not going on. They act as if things are normal and the American and the world population are not being targeted. I frequently point out that our politicians are cowardly, corrupt, or simply out of touch for a reason. I've previously written that our republic has flatlined. This corrupting process is apparently inevitable in republics. The truth is that our efforts may be futile, and our republic may simply die under the weight of its corruption. Regardless, this fight might be fought in multiple ways, as it's not simply about saving the republic, it's about saving humanity. Still, if you'd indulge me in another thought experiment, imagine peering into the microscope again, and this time you see sometime within the next decade, the prosecution indictments of those that collaborated with distribution of modern technology, elected officials, hospital administrators, academic administrators, and employers, big tech, big media conspirators that censor information and their potential harm of whatever is put into the human body, all facing justice. Those at the WHO, WEF that are seeking to create a global tyranny are pleading that they were only trying to make the world a better place by poisoning most of the planet. Well, if you can't imagine it, you can't create it. To those ushering in the Great Reset, in the spirit of General Washington, I wish you and yours a Merry Christmas. May you have a good time at those partying and drunken, as the partying and drunken Hessians did in Trenton. May your hangover be as short-lived. This is the source is by Dr. Samson, and it's by Sean Maddle on News Punch. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Of course, Merry Christmas and blessings to you all. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.